Alright, so now we're going to talk a little bit about chemical equilibrium and just the basics of chemical equilibrium and how it works. So let's look at an illustration of a chemical equilibrium. So if I look at brome cresol green, we'll just call it HB for now. B is an organic compound, so it's got a proton attached to it. The HB form is going to be yellow. When we lose that proton, that H+, it's going to form a B-, which is going to be a blue color. Okay, this reaction can occur in this one direction and go to completion. Okay, we can have chemical reactions that do that. We can have chemical reactions in which the H+ and the B- combine back together to form the HB. So we can have reversible reactions. So products can go to initial reactants. So the first one, we have reactants going to products. The second one, we have products going back to form reactants. Well, when this occurs, we actually have both reactions going on at the same time, and we call that an equilibrium. Okay, so let's take a look here at a little video and see what I'm talking about. Right. So with this video, I have some brome cresol, which is the HB. It's going to be dissolved in water. Okay. And you can see that it actually forms a green colored solution. Okay. HB is yellow, the B- is blue, therefore yellow and blue make green. Now, as I start to add some acid to this solution, you can see that it goes towards the more yellow form because I get a higher concentration of HB in that solution. But B- is still present there. This is an equilibrium, so it's going back and forth. Okay, both reactions are occurring at the same time. I end up with more HB present. Okay, as I add base to this, I start to shift it the other way. So I go to where I have more of the blue form. And now that I have more of the blue form, I still have some of that HB yellow left. It's just not as high a concentration, so I can't see that yellow color. Okay. Now, as I add some more acid, slowly decrease the concentration of the blue form. All right, it takes a second here. I still have a lot of blue in there. And I start to get more of that yellow form. Okay, when I reach that happy medium again, I end up with yellow and blue both present at the same time, and it turns this green color. All right, that's the basics of an equilibrium. Now, true equilibrium, they're not always going to be the same concentrations. Okay, but all species are going to be present in that solution at some concentration. All right. So as I add more acid, I see a higher concentration of that yellow form. The blue form is still there, it's just not high enough concentration for me to see. Add more base, I go back a little bit to the green. You can see the little funnel cloud there with the green in it from the magnetic stir bar spinning. Eventually, I go through the green solution as a whole. It's a little bit on the yellow side. Okay, I can go add more base, take it a little bit darker green, add a little bit extra base, take it back to the blue color. All right, so constantly going back and forth with these. All right, but at all phases, the concentrations may be different, but all these species are actually present in that solution. That's just the thing with an equilibrium. All those species are present. Okay, their concentrations vary. All right, now I'm just going to take it back and forth here a couple of times. Okay, so when you get down to an actual equilibrium, you can see that it's really back and forth and back and forth, back and forth. This is what we're going to call a dynamic equilibrium. Okay, reverse reaction is occurring, the forward reaction is occurring. They're both occurring at the same time. Right? Just depends on what concentration of species we have. So now I'll just take it down to a nice coastal teal color. We will want to be coastal teal. Right. And that's going to be the end of that video. So let's talk a little bit more about these equilibriums. So I have A, going to B. That's the forward reaction. But remember, the reverse reaction can occur where B goes to A. So if the rate at which A is going to B and the rate at which B is going to A are equal, we're actually at an equilibrium. Again, that doesn't mean the concentrations necessarily have to be the same. Okay, the concentrations can be different, but the rate at which these reactions are occurring are going to be the same. All right. I'm not concerned right now that you understand rates. Don't worry about that with this. This is just showing you that these reactions go at certain speeds. The forward reaction speed is the same as the reverse reaction speed. Okay. So let's look at some examples of equilibrium. They're going to help us understand why we study equilibriums, why they're important. So let's look at weak acids. So HC2H3O2, acetic acid. It's a weak acid, which means it's not going to fully ionize in water. So it's going to only partially form H pluses and C2H3O2 minuses. Okay, that's vinegar. All right. Now, if we just look at a solution of vinegar, we don't actually see the back and forth like we saw with the Brome Cresol. Okay, not everything is going to be visual. All right, but if we could look in the solution, and here you can see representation where we've got initially 5 molecules of the acetic acid, but because it's a weak acid, not all of them are going to break up. So only one of those 5 are going to break up into an H plus and a C2H3O2 minus. All those species are present there in equilibrium. Now, what can happen is the one that's broken up can actually recombine to form the acetic acid again, and one of the ones that are fully formed can break apart to form the H plus and C2H3O2 minus. Okay, it goes back and forth and back and forth. Okay, but we have a lot of weak acids. Weak acids are very, very important. All right, another example is precipitates. When we have a solid formed, well, we see a solid, but in fact, it's slightly soluble. Okay, it's not greatly soluble like the other things that are truly soluble, like sodium chloride, but we are going to have some species present in solution of in this case, we have silver chloride going Ag plus and Cl minus. Okay, so the silver chloride forms this nice white chloride in solution. Okay, but the reality is, part of that is in solid form. If you see the purple and green clump down below, that's going to be the silver and the chlorines coming together to form the silver chloride. But we have part of them still in solution. You can see a silver off by itself and a chlorine off by itself. Remember, those are still the ions. It's a silver ion, the chloride ion. So we can see, though, that most of them are clumped down below, but we still do have a few in solution. Okay. Other examples, we can have gases. So nitrogen gas combining with hydrogen gas can form ammonia. Nitrogen gas we can't see. Hydrogen gas we can't see. Ammonia we can't see. But those gases are in equilibrium inside this flask here. All right? You don't get a pretty picture with this one showing all the molecules. Some other examples that are important, if we look at biological systems, we can look at oxygen transfer. Okay, we can take HB, which is going to be hemoglobin, all right, which is in your blood. It's part of your red blood cells. Hemoglobin reacts with oxygen to form this hemoglobin and oxygen complex. Okay, we don't worry about naming it. All right, but that hemoglobin has oxygen attached to it. Okay, when we look at the hemoglobin itself, it's this large complex protein that has certain binding sites for oxygen. Well, if we look at the red blood cell, that red blood cell is made up of these hemoglobins. Where the oxygen then can bind to the hemoglobins, the red blood cells then transport the oxygen through the body. But that's in constant equilibrium. If it wasn't in equilibrium, we'd never be able to remove the oxygen from the hemoglobin to actually use the oxygen for our needs. Okay, so remember, the forward reaction where we bind the oxygen to the hemoglobin is going on. At the same time, the reverse reaction can be going on where we free up oxygen to be used. A problem with the hemoglobin. This is another equilibrium that's a problem. The hemoglobin can actually bind to carbon monoxide. So we can form this complex with carbon monoxide. Right? Well, if the hemoglobin is taken up by the carbon monoxide, it can't have oxygen combined with it. So therefore, we run into the problem of not being able to transport oxygen, and you can actually suffocate from carbon monoxide poisoning because you can't actually get oxygen transported through your body. Now, a way to address this, we introduce a high concentration of O2 into the bloodstream, and that forces the CO off. But we have to go to really high concentrations of O2 in order for this to occur. So we actually have these competing equilibriums with hemoglobin binding to the carbon monoxide versus hemoglobin binding to the oxygen. Again, example of a very important equilibrium process. Another important one in the biological systems. We have to have buffers to keep pH levels constant. So inside our cells, we have this dihydrogen phosphate buffer that helps maintain pH levels inside our cells. We also have it in blood plasma. Okay, and you've seen this one, it's a little bit more familiar. All right, you see carbonic acid going to H plus and HCO3 minus. That's actually in our blood plasma to help maintain our pH levels in our blood, because if our pH levels get out of whack, it can cause very serious damage and even death. Those are some just basic ideas of equilibriums, and just understanding the basic concept of equilibrium, the fact that these reactions go in the forward direction, the reverse direction. When we think about weak acids have these equilibriums where they don't fully dissociate or ionize. So another example is when we have these precipitates form, those solids are going to be mainly insoluble, but a little bit is actually going to get into solution. Okay, that's why it's dangerous with some of these solids. If they have things like lead or other toxic metals, even having the solid present, a little bit is going to dissolve in water, and we don't want to ingest that. So there's all sorts of equilibriums out there. Just understanding that process and the basic ideas of the equilibrium is what we're looking at for this particular section. Okay, that's it.